The human colonies in the outer regions of space lived in a calm rhythm that had taken many years to build. Life there was not perfect, but it was peaceful in a way people had learned to appreciate. Families built homes under transparent domes that showed the stars like a never-ending ocean. Workers traveled in small shuttles from one outpost to another, maintaining farms, energy stations, and mining fields. Children played in artificial parks with glowing trees that grew in the soft light of a distant sun. It was a simple life, far away from the busy trade hubs and political noise of the central systems. For most people, each day felt predictable. And predictable meant safe. But even in peaceful places, there are always small signs that something far away is shifting. Sometimes it starts as a rumor. Sometimes as a message that arrives quietly, without urgency, but with a slight weight that makes a person reread it twice. The first hint came through long-range sensors belonging to a small colony on the edge of human territory. The technicians there watched the data appear on their screens like faint shadows. Unknown signals, slow movements, fleets traveling in unusual patterns. Nothing openly hostile, nothing that demanded an alarm, but nothing friendly either. The technicians sent the report to the main communication tower. The tower sent it to the local defense group. The defense group forwarded it to the central command. Each step followed the standard protocol humans had created after centuries of learning the hard way that peace never lasts forever unless you protect it. Still, no one panicked. Humans had seen such things many times. Sometimes alien traders passed through the region. Sometimes a foreign scouting ship made a long-range scan and drifted away again. Normally, it ended there. So most people thought this would be the same. But in the following days, more reports arrived. The unknown fleets were growing. Their movement became more organized. Their scanners swept wider, reaching deeper into human territory. One colony noticed that their long-range satellites were being probed by faint signals that looked like someone testing their defenses. Another colony picked up encrypted messages between foreign ships. No one could crack the codes, but the tone and pattern suggested planning. This time, the human response was not fear. It was readiness. Humans had learned through history that the moment you show weakness in the galaxy, someone will take advantage of it. So the colonies strengthened their shields. Patrol ships were called back to their posts. Trade routes were shortened to keep civilians safe. Even then, citizens went to work as usual, keeping life calm and steady. Nobody wanted to spread panic, but deep inside, people knew something was coming. One of the outer colonies, small but resource-rich, was the first to feel the real pressure. Its sensors detected what looked like a scouting wave from the unknown fleets. The ships didn't announce themselves or request permission to enter the region. They simply appeared, silent and bold, as if they already owned the space they were entering. Patrol units shadowed them from a distance, watching as they circled and scanned the colony's infrastructure. The humans didn't fire. They didn't shout. They simply observed with a cold patience that often surprised their neighbors across the galaxy. Humans were known for many things: creativity, stubbornness, unity in danger. But when threatened, they became quiet and calculating. That quietness was often misunderstood as weakness. But those who made that mistake usually regretted it. Days passed. The unknown fleets didn't leave. They drifted in the shadows like predators, studying their prey. Colonists tried to stay calm, going about their routines, pretending that nothing was wrong. Workers repaired mining machines. Farmers harvested crops. Children continued their studies. But everyone felt the tension. Even the air felt heavier beneath the colony domes, as if waiting for something to break. In the main control center of the colony, officers gathered around a long table displaying holographic maps. The lights were dim. Screens flickered with incoming data. For hours, They studied the movements of the alien ships, tracing their paths across the star map. None of the patterns looked peaceful. One of the senior officers leaned back, rubbing his forehead as he stared at the map. He didn't know the exact intentions of these fleets, but he understood one thing clearly. They were testing human limits, testing how far they could push before the humans reacted. Central Command on Earth received every update. The leaders listened, debated, and watched the situation unfold with serious but controlled expressions. They didn't want to escalate things without reason, but they also refused to let anyone think humans were blind or timid. Surrounding alien civilizations had learned long ago that Earth did not attack first, but they were never afraid to defend themselves with all their strength when pushed. Because of this, humans had a reputation. A quiet one. A reputation that many young civilizations did not fully understand. The elders of the galaxy knew the stories. They whispered them like warnings. Never corner a human colony. Never strike first thinking humans will break. Never assume that a calm silence means fear. Humans may live peacefully, may trade fairly, may even avoid conflict longer than most species. But once forced to respond, they become something fierce, something disciplined, something unstoppable. Some species called them warriors. Others called them strategists. But one old civilization had called them something else long ago. Dragons. Not because humans breathed fire, but because when awakened, humans burned away anything that threatened their people. But the younger alien races didn't know these stories well. Some didn't believe them. And the fleets gathering near the colonies were part of that younger, ambitious generation that wanted territory, resources, and influence. They saw human colonies as easy targets. After all, humans were peaceful. Humans were quiet. Humans didn't strike first. To the attackers, this looked like softness. The humans, however, saw everything. Every scan. Every pattern. Every suspicious movement. They recorded it all, sending logs back to Earth and the nearby military stations. They didn't respond aggressively yet. They didn't fire a shot, but they prepared. They pulled ships into formation. They checked communication systems. They trained civilians in shelters and emergency drills without creating panic. And through all this, life continued as normal. That was the strange strength of humans, their ability to carry on calmly while preparing for the worst. One evening, the stars above the colony looked particularly bright. Families gathered near the dome to watch the sky. Children pointed at distant lights, unaware that some of those lights belonged to unknown fleets monitoring them. Adults exchanged uneasy glances, thinking about what might happen next. The colony remained quiet on the outside, but the air was thick with the sense that something was approaching. A storm that had not arrived yet, but whose shadow had already fallen across the land. People hoped it would pass peacefully. They hoped the unknown ships would turn away. Humans were always willing to give others a chance to choose peace, but the galaxy did not always choose peace. And when danger finally stepped too close, when someone crossed the line, when someone harmed a human colony, the calm silence would end. The quiet that had lingered over the human colonies shattered one morning like glass under a hammer. The unknown fleets, which had been circling at the edges of human space, made their move. The first attack was sudden, brutal, and precise. Explosions lit up the colony's skies. Shields flared and dimmed, and flared again as waves of energy blasts struck. Alarms screamed across the stations, but the humans did not panic. Those who were in control of the colonies reacted with speed that few enemies could have anticipated. Communication lines blinked and hummed as messages zipped between outposts. Civilian evacuation protocols activated. People who had spent years working in these colonies now moved as one, following well-practiced procedures. Children were shepherded into shelters. Farmers left fields that would be destroyed by fire. Engineers scrambled to protect vital equipment and secure power grids. Every person knew what to do, not because they wanted war, but because they had been trained for survival. The alien attackers, confident in their sudden strike, assumed they would find humans disorganized. They believed the colonies would crumble before any real resistance could be formed. What they did not expect was that humans were patient and resilient. For every ship that fell, 2 more systems were activated in response. For every breach, humans had prepared countermeasures. Their defenses were not flashy. They were not designed to impress. They were effective. The first clash of fleets occurred above the largest colony. Alien ships, sleek and fast, tried to bypass the defensive satellites. They expected little resistance from human vessels, which appeared small and unassuming in comparison. But as soon as they entered striking distance, humans revealed their readiness. Defensive drones swarmed with precision. Energy nets entangled several ships. Point defense lasers cut through enemy projectiles before they could hit. Humans were not attacking recklessly. They were targeting critical points, striking in ways that minimized their own risk while maximizing the effect on the intruders. On the ground, the colony faced destruction, but human engineers had prepared in advance. Emergency walls rose from the ground, sealing off key structures. Critical facilities switched to backup power automatically. Even when sections of the colony were damaged, life could continue elsewhere. Humans had built their homes not only to survive, but to endure, to adapt, and to fight back if necessary. The alien fleets, which had believed humans were weak, began to see the truth. Humans fought with patience and intelligence. Every defensive maneuver was calculated. Every retreat was temporary, leading to a counterattack that struck when the enemy least expected it. The aliens had assumed chaos would follow the first strikes, but humans thrived under pressure. Chaos did not break them. It sharpened them. In one part of the colony, a small human ship managed to infiltrate an alien squadron and disrupt its formation. Using clever maneuvers and precise energy bursts, it forced the aliens to scatter. This was not just survival. It was a warning. Every move the humans made said the same thing: we will not yield. You miscalculated. Meanwhile, across other colonies, attacks continued. Some outposts were smaller, less defended, and took more damage. Buildings burned. Fields were lost. Civilian structures collapsed. But the humans did not panic. They had built redundancies into their systems. Supplies were moved to safe locations in advance. Hospitals operated at full capacity despite partial destruction. In the midst of explosions and fire, people worked to save lives, to repair equipment, and to prepare for the next wave. The alien commanders, watching through their advanced sensors, could not believe what they were seeing. The humans were responding so quickly, so effectively, that the aliens had no advantage. Every strike they thought would cripple a colony was countered. Every surprise attack was anticipated. They had attacked with pride, assuming their numbers and firepower would guarantee victory. Instead, they faced strategy, resilience, and determination beyond what they had expected. Some humans took risks that showed the courage the aliens could not understand. Pilots flew into dangerous zones to rescue stranded colonists. Engineers ran into unstable buildings to stabilize energy cores. Civilians carried supplies through debris to ensure that those injured had what they needed. Each act was small on its own, but together they formed a web of resistance that could not be ignored. As the hours passed, the first major alien fleet began to falter. Human tactical command had analyzed enemy movements and predicted the next strike patterns. Using these predictions, small strike teams targeted supply ships, communication arrays, and command centers. The aliens had assumed humans would be reactive, but humans were proactive. Their strikes were not wild. They were precise, deliberate, and highly effective. For the first time, the attacking forces realized they had underestimated humans. These were not settlers who would simply surrender their homes. These were people who had survived harsh planets, cold voids of space, and generations of conflict and rebuilding. They were disciplined, they were unified, and they were willing to fight for their survival and for the people around them. The colony leaders, coordinating with Earth, began sending reinforcement ships to support the besieged colonies. These were not vast fleets, just enough to strengthen positions, disrupt alien supply lines, and provide backup for the humans who were already holding the front lines. With each new arrival, the aliens felt pressure they had not expected. Their initial confidence turned into frustration. Their strategies failed again and again. Human resistance, although calm and precise, inspired those watching from other colonies. Citizens who could not fight physically still contributed. They operated drones, managed communication networks, repaired shields, and supported the brave few who were directly engaged. Humans had learned long ago that defense was everyone's responsibility. Every individual mattered. Every action mattered. By the end of the first day of the attack, the aliens had achieved some minor victories, damaging buildings and destroying a few ships, but they had failed to break the human colonies. More importantly, they had awakened a response far beyond what they had expected. Humans were no longer just defending. They were countering. They were turning the situation around, and as night fell across the colonies, humans paused only briefly to take stock. Ships were repaired. Shields were recharged. Civilians were accounted for. Communications were restored. Leaders convened to plan the next day's actions. They did not celebrate because the danger was not over, but they were focused, and their focus was deadly. The alien commanders, reviewing the day's results, faced an uncomfortable truth. They had assumed humans would crumble under the first attack. Instead, they had found themselves facing resistance that was strategic, coordinated, and relentless. They began to wonder if their gamble had been a mistake. The humans were stronger, smarter, and braver than they had imagined. Humans did not boast. They did not send threats. They did not act without purpose. They simply adapted, protected their people, and prepared for the next challenge. And even in the midst of destruction and chaos, they retained the calm determination that had allowed them to survive this long in the galaxy. By the time the second wave of attacks approached, humans had already adjusted their defenses. Alien ships that expected easy targets now encountered deadly traps, precise countermeasures, and relentless retaliation. The humans were learning faster than the attackers. They were observing patterns, predicting moves, and striking where it hurt the most. For the alien fleets, the reality became clear. The humans were no ordinary colony. They were resilient, relentless, and resourceful. They were awake. They were ready. They were not going to give up. And that awakening was only the beginning. The attack had started the battle. But it had also roused something much larger, something the aliens had not considered. The dragons had begun to stir. And once fully awake, they would not be ignored. The morning after the first wave of attacks, the human colonies were quiet, but the calm was different now. It was not the peaceful calm of ordinary life. It was a tense, alert calm, like the moment just before a storm breaks fully. People moved with purpose. Every hand, every mind, every action had a role. There was no panic. There was only focus. Leaders from the outer colonies gathered via secure communication channels. They shared reports, compared damage assessments, and exchanged observations of the alien fleets. The information they had collected was detailed and precise. Every movement, every strike, every anomaly in the enemy's patterns was noted. Humans had learned long ago that knowledge was the first weapon in any battle. The more you understood the enemy, the stronger your response could be. The first order of business was ensuring the safety of the civilians. Evacuations had already begun, but now they became more organized. Families moved toward secure shelters. Supply caravans carried food, water, medical kits, and energy cells to safe locations. Engineers reinforced damaged buildings and restored energy grids where possible. Even the youngest teenagers, trained in emergency procedures, were helping in small but important ways, guiding people, operating drones, carrying supplies. Every person felt the weight of responsibility, but no one faltered. Humans had always adapted in times of crisis. The military response was now fully active. Fleet commanders analyzed the data collected from the previous attacks and prepared counter strategies. They knew the alien attackers would strike again, probably in more aggressive ways. But humans did not panic. They had patience, intelligence, and discipline on their side. Small teams of ships were sent to intercept and disrupt enemy scouts before they reached the colonies. Others monitored supply routes to cut off reinforcements. Above the main colony, the skies were filled with human patrols, moving with silent precision. Each ship followed calculated paths, maintaining formation and covering vulnerable areas. Communication between ships was constant, yet controlled with no wasted words. The humans understood that coordination was the backbone of survival. Every decision mattered. Every movement counted. The aliens, expecting easy dominance, began their second assault with a sense of arrogance. They assumed the humans were still recovering, still disorganized. But the humans had already learned from the first strike. Every pattern of the enemy had been analyzed, and countermeasures had been put in place. Defensive satellites adjusted their targeting algorithms. Drones were deployed in unexpected ways. Patrol ships were ready to intercept before the enemy could reach critical areas. When the first wave of the second attack reached the colony, the aliens were met with precise resistance. Human ships moved as if anticipating every move. Energy beams cut off supply lines. Interceptor drones disrupted formations. Even when some enemy ships managed to strike, the damage was limited because the humans had built redundancies into every critical system. Nothing essential could be destroyed with a single blow. On the ground, engineers worked tirelessly to repair what had been damaged the day before. Fires were extinguished. Power grids restored. Communication systems stabilized. Civilians who had been frightened just a day earlier now moved with purpose and confidence, assisting wherever they could. The humans' resilience was becoming clear, not just to themselves, but to the aliens observing from above. Human leaders communicated constantly with each other, adjusting strategies as the battle unfolded. One plan failed, another immediately took its place. One ship disabled, a backup was already on the way. The humans' ability to adapt in real time made them unpredictable and extremely difficult to overwhelm. The aliens had expected a slow, chaotic response. Instead, they were met with coordination, strategy, and patience. There were moments of bravery that shone brightly during the chaos. Pilots risked their ships to protect civilians fleeing from damaged areas. Engineers ran into unstable structures to stabilize reactors and prevent catastrophic explosions. Medical teams worked around the clock to treat injuries from both the attacks and the hurried evacuations. Every human understood the stakes, and everyone gave their maximum effort. Despite all this activity, humans did not act recklessly. Every strike was measured. Every move was strategic. They were not fighting for revenge. They were fighting to protect what they had built, to protect their people, and to survive. The aliens had underestimated the humans' intelligence as much as their courage dot as the second day of fighting progressed. The humans began to take control of the situation. Alien ships that had assumed dominance were now forced to retreat in several areas. Human forces targeted critical points, supply ships, energy carriers, and command centers. These strikes did not just damage the enemy, they disrupted the entire flow of the attack, slowing the advance and forcing the aliens to reconsider their strategy. Civilians began noticing the shift. From the ground, people could see alien ships being disabled in the skies above. Explosions in space sent bright flashes across the horizon, but the human ships were always visible among the chaos, maneuvering with precision, defending their colonies. Children, who had been scared just a day before, now watched with wide eyes as humans demonstrated courage, skill, and intelligence beyond what the attackers had expected. The alien commanders, watching from their distant fleets, were beginning to feel the pressure. Their confidence from the first attack had been shattered. They had assumed humans would crumble quickly, but instead, they had met strategy and endurance. For every plan they implemented, humans found a way to counter it. For every strike they delivered, humans found a way to protect their own and retaliate. Humans did not act out of rage, but out of calculated necessity. Every ship sent out, every strike executed, every defensive measure activated was carefully considered. And in doing so, they displayed something the aliens could not understand easily: patience. The humans were willing to wait, to observe, to adapt, and then strike when it mattered most. By midday, the battle had reached a turning point. In several sectors, alien ships were retreating or being forced to maneuver defensively. Humans had begun to take control of the skies above the colonies. They were no longer simply defending, they were shaping the battlefield to their advantage. Small human strike teams were moving swiftly, targeting weak points and cutting off enemy supplies. On the colonies themselves, life was still chaotic, but in a way that humans could manage. Citizens continued to assist, maintaining vital infrastructure, guiding evacuations, and supporting frontline teams. Their combined efforts allowed the human military to focus on strategic operations, knowing that civilians were doing their part. This unity was something that alien attackers had not accounted for. As the sun set on the second day, the human colonies had survived. They had taken damage, but the enemy had not broken them. More importantly, the humans had learned from the attacks. They had observed patterns, analyzed weaknesses, and prepared for the next wave. Every person, every ship, every defensive system was now better prepared. The aliens, on the other hand, were shaken. Their assumptions about human weakness had been proven wrong. They had attacked expecting easy victories, but they had encountered intelligence, resilience, and coordination. They had provoked a response they were not ready for. For the humans, this was not a moment of celebration. There were still battles to fight. Colonies still needed protection. Ships still needed repair. But there was a sense of confidence now that had not existed the day before. They had faced a dangerous enemy and held their ground. They had demonstrated that they were not easy targets. And while the aliens regrouped, reconsidered, and planned their next move, the humans continued their work. Every strike they planned, every strategy they developed, every system they reinforced was a step toward taking full control of the battle. They were no longer reacting blindly. They were preparing to show the galaxy that attacking human colonies was not a small mistake. It was a dangerous one. By the end of the second day, humans had not only survived, they had adapted, learned, and prepared. Their colonies remained standing. Their people were still alive and determined. Their ships were ready to strike when the moment was right. And somewhere, deep in the coordination centers and battle maps, humans began to feel a quiet satisfaction that comes from knowing they were no longer just defending, they were beginning to fight back. The aliens, who had believed they were testing a weak target, now realized that humans were much stronger, smarter, and more united than they had imagined. They had awakened something they had underestimated, something patient, intelligent, and relentless. By the fourth day, the human colonies were no longer just defending, they were preparing to take control. The first strikes had taught them a lot about the alien attackers. Humans had watched every move, learned every pattern, and found every weakness. The enemy had assumed that attacking would be easy, but now they were facing an organized, disciplined response that they had not anticipated. In the main control centers, fleet commanders gathered around holographic maps, showing the positions of every ship in the region. Reports from scouts, satellites, and drone systems were streaming in constantly. Each piece of data was analyzed immediately. The humans were no longer simply reacting. They were predicting, preparing, and planning. Every move the aliens made could now be countered. Every opening could be exploited. The civilians in the colonies had been trained for emergencies, and now their training was proving invaluable. Farmers operated drones to repair shields over energy farms. Engineers worked around the clock to restore power to damaged buildings. Medical teams were stretched thin but organized, treating injuries while keeping morale high. Even those who could not fight physically contributed in essential ways. Humans understood that survival was a collective effort. The alien attackers were beginning to notice a shift. The humans were no longer scattered, panicked, or purely defensive. Their ships were coordinating attacks, targeting supply lines and communication hubs with precision. Small human strike teams moved swiftly through space, hitting critical points and disappearing before the enemy could respond. Every move was deliberate. Every action had purpose. Above the largest colony, the skies were filled with human ships moving in formation. Energy beams streaked across space, cutting off enemy reinforcements. Interceptor drones swarmed around key targets, disabling weapon systems and slowing enemy advances. The humans were no longer just surviving. They were dictating the pace of the battle. The aliens, who had once believed in the simplicity of their attack, were now reacting defensively. Their fleets were forced into patterns they had not planned. Their supply lines were disrupted. Their ships were damaged and scattered. What had been an offensive strike was now being turned against them. The humans had begun to control the battlefield. On the ground, engineers and civilians continued to support the efforts. Damaged shields were repaired quickly. Power grids were rerouted. Food and water supplies were moved to secure locations. Every small action had a large impact. Humans had learned that victory was built not only in space, but also on the ground. Every citizen played a role in the survival of the colony. Fleet commanders coordinated with colony leaders to create strategic strikes. Human ships targeted the enemy's weak points, energy carriers, communication satellites, and command centers. Each successful strike reduced the enemy's coordination and forced them into mistakes. Every misstep by the aliens was an opportunity for humans to gain more control. The alien commanders were beginning to understand the challenge they faced. Humans were not only resilient, but adaptive. They were patient, intelligent, and disciplined. They responded to every threat with precision and never wasted resources. For every attack the aliens launched, the humans had a countermeasure ready. For every move the aliens planned, the humans had a prediction waiting. Human pilots demonstrated incredible courage. They flew into dangerous zones to disable critical enemy ships, knowing the risks but focusing on the mission. Engineers risked their lives to stabilize unstable energy cores. Civilians coordinated evacuations and repairs under fire. Every action was measured but brave, showing a level of dedication and unity that the aliens could not comprehend. By midday, the humans had begun to gain the upper hand. The aliens were forced to retreat in several areas. Their formations were broken. Their supply lines were cut. Their command systems were disrupted. The humans had turned their first successful defense into a full-scale counteroffensive. Even the smallest human ships were contributing to the effort. Scouts moved quickly to disable enemy communications. Fighters intercepted supply ships. Drones targeted weak points in alien defenses. Every unit, no matter how small, played a role in the larger strategy. Humans understood that victory was achieved through unity, not just strength. On the ground, civilians watched the skies as flashes of energy streaked across space. Some were terrified. Some were awestruck. But all understood that the humans were fighting not just for survival, but for the future of their colonies. The courage and skill of the military inspired everyone to keep contributing in their own ways. Alien commanders struggled to adjust. Every tactic they used seemed to fail. Every maneuver they attempted was countered. They realized they had underestimated the humans' intelligence and resilience. What they had expected to be an easy conquest had turned into a chaotic nightmare. The humans were not simply defending, they were shaping the battlefield and controlling the pace of the fight. In one daring move, human strike teams managed to infiltrate the enemy's main supply fleet. Using precision attacks, they disabled several key ships and destroyed supplies critical to the aliens' operations. The enemy's morale began to falter. They had underestimated humans at every turn, and now they were paying the price. The humans did not celebrate their victories loudly. They remained focused, knowing the battle was far from over. Every victory was a step toward full control, but each day brought new challenges. The humans maintained their calm, disciplined approach, ensuring that every action contributed to long-term success rather than short-term glory. Civilians continued to play their part. They repaired damaged facilities, transported supplies, and assisted in medical care. Even children contributed by operating drones, guiding small vehicles, and helping maintain communications. Every member of the community was involved. Humans understood that survival and victory were not just for soldiers. They were for everyone. By the end of the day, humans had shifted the momentum of the battle. The alien fleets had been pushed back in key sectors. Supply lines were disrupted. Communication systems were compromised. The humans were no longer just defending. They were actively controlling the fight. The aliens, now aware of their miscalculation, began to retreat further, trying to regroup and assess the situation. But the humans had already anticipated this. Human ships moved swiftly to cut off escape routes and prevent the enemy from reorganizing effectively. Every move by the humans forced the aliens to respond defensively. In the colonies, people began to feel a renewed sense of confidence. They had faced attacks, survived, and adapted. They had witnessed the bravery and skill of their military forces. They had participated in efforts to protect and sustain their homes. The humans understood that they were not just survivors, they were fighters, strategists, and protectors of their people. As night fell, the colonies were quiet again, but the air was different now. There was no panic, no fear. There was determination. Humans had faced the storm and had begun to control it. They were no longer passive. They were active, aware, and prepared to do whatever it took to protect their people and their colonies. The aliens, on the other hand, were shaken. They had believed in the simplicity of their plan, but now they faced an enemy they had underestimated. Humans were not weak, disorganized, or easily frightened. They were patient, intelligent, and relentless. They adapted quickly and struck precisely. They were awake. They were ready, and as humans prepared for the next day of fighting, one thing was clear. They were no longer simply defending their colonies. They were becoming a force the aliens could not ignore. They were the dragons, and they had begun to rise fully. By the fifth day, the humans had fully adapted to the alien attacks. What had begun as a desperate struggle to survive had now transformed into a carefully organized counteroffensive. The colonies were no longer passive targets. They had become strongholds of strategy, coordination, and resilience. Every citizen, every soldier, every engineer knew their role, and every action contributed to the larger plan. The aliens, once confident in their superiority, were now struggling. Their initial strikes, intended to crush the colonies quickly, had failed. Their fleet formations were fractured, supply lines disrupted, and communication systems compromised. They had underestimated the humans' ability to learn, adapt, and fight back with both patience and precision. Human commanders used every resource available. They deployed scout ships to monitor enemy movements, strike teams to attack supply lines, and interceptors to defend critical areas. Even smaller, seemingly insignificant ships played a vital role. Each one carried out specific tasks that contributed to the overall strategy. Humans understood the importance of teamwork. No ship operated alone, and no action was wasted. On the ground, civilians were integral to the effort. Engineers repaired damaged facilities, maintained energy shields, and reinforced critical structures. Medical teams treated the injured with urgency and care, while logistical personnel ensured that food, water, and supplies reached those who needed them most. Everyone understood that their contribution mattered. Even children participated in small ways, guiding drones, assisting in communication centers, and helping maintain morale. Humans had a unique ability to turn even ordinary people into crucial contributors during times of crisis. As the day progressed, the humans launched carefully planned strikes against the alien fleets. These were not reckless attacks born of anger. They were precise, calculated maneuvers based on observations and predictions. Human ships targeted weak points in the enemy's formations, disabling critical vessels and cutting off supply lines. Drones swarmed enemy ships, disabling weapon systems and disrupting communications. Every strike reduced the aliens' ability to fight effectively. In space battles above the colonies, the humans moved with coordination that amazed even those observing from afar. They were patient, waiting for the right moment to strike, and acting with speed and precision. Even when facing superior numbers, humans leveraged their intelligence and teamwork to create advantages. Every maneuver was calculated, every decision deliberate. The aliens had assumed that human colonies would crumble under pressure, but instead, they were facing an enemy that was growing stronger and more effective with each encounter. The aliens tried to adjust, but their efforts were slow and ineffective. Every attempt to regroup or reinforce their positions was met with human interference. Supply ships were destroyed before reaching their destination. Communication networks were intercepted and disrupted. Command ships were targeted to create confusion and disorder. The humans were dictating the flow of the battle, forcing the aliens to react instead of act. On the ground, civilians watched the skies as flashes of light streaked across space, signaling human victories. They were no longer terrified. They had seen the skill, courage, and determination of their forces. They understood that they were not only defending their homes, they were part of a larger effort that would push the aliens back. Their confidence grew, and with it, their contributions became even more effective. One remarkable aspect of the humans' counteroffensive was their ability to combine strategy with courage. Pilots flew into dangerous zones to disable key enemy vessels. Engineers repaired unstable energy cores under fire. Strike teams infiltrated enemy positions to disrupt critical operations. Every action was risky, yet measured. Humans were not reckless. They were deliberate, using every advantage they had to maximize impact, while minimizing unnecessary loss. By midday, the aliens were beginning to suffer serious setbacks. Entire squadrons had been destroyed or forced to retreat. Supply lines were broken, leaving many enemy ships vulnerable. Communication channels were disrupted, causing confusion and miscoordination. The humans had turned the tide, and it was clear that the aliens were no longer in control. The colonies themselves were strong and resilient. Even where structures had been damaged in earlier attacks, humans had repaired them quickly. Shields were reinforced, power grids restored, and vital systems brought back online. Engineers and civilians worked tirelessly to ensure that the colonies remained operational and capable of supporting the ongoing counteroffensive. As the day wore on, the humans continued to press their advantage. Strike teams launched coordinated attacks against remaining enemy fleets. They targeted energy supplies, command vessels, and weapon systems. The aliens' ability to respond was diminished. Every mistake they made was exploited. Every weakness was punished. Humans had learned to fight not with brute force alone, but with intelligence, patience, and relentless precision. The aliens, once confident in their plan, were now forced to acknowledge the human strength. They had underestimated not only human resilience, but also human strategy. The colonies were no longer passive targets. They were active, coordinated forces, capable of adapting to any situation. The humans had turned the battle in their favor, and were now dictating the pace and outcome. Above the largest colony, the humans launched a daring strike against the enemy's central command vessel. Using stealth and speed, they disabled key systems, forcing the alien commanders to retreat further and reorganize. The impact was immediate. Communication between enemy ships broke down. Confusion spread through their ranks. The aliens had expected quick victories, but they were now fighting for survival. On the ground, civilians cheered as news of the success reached them. Even though the battle was far from over, the humans had demonstrated their strength and skill. Engineers repaired systems faster than ever. Medical teams worked with renewed energy. Every person felt a part of the victory, knowing that their contributions, no matter how small, had made a difference. The humans' ability to combine patience, strategy, and courage was proving decisive. They did not act out of anger or revenge. They acted with purpose, using every resource and every advantage to achieve maximum effect. They adapted to each challenge, learned from every encounter, and planned their next moves with precision. The aliens were beginning to realize that they had misjudged their opponent. By the end of the 5th day, the humans had not only survived, they had gained the upper hand. Alien fleets were scattered and weakened. Supply lines were disrupted. Communication systems were compromised. Human strike teams continued to press their advantage, keeping the enemy on the defensive. Civilians in the colonies felt a renewed sense of hope. They had seen the skill and courage of their forces. They had contributed to the efforts in meaningful ways. They understood that they were not just defending their homes. They were part of a larger effort that would push the aliens back and secure their future. The aliens, facing unexpected resistance, were forced to retreat in several sectors. Their confidence had been shattered. They had assumed that human colonies would be easy targets, but they had encountered an enemy that was intelligent, disciplined, and united. They had awakened something far more powerful than they had anticipated. Humans were no longer simply defending. They were taking control. They were dictating the pace of the battle, exploiting weaknesses, and turning every advantage to their favor. The aliens, once confident in their plan, were now forced to respond defensively, struggling to maintain order in the chaos the humans had created. As night fell on the 5th day, the colonies were quiet but alert. Humans had survived, adapted, and fought back. They had learned from every attack and used that knowledge to turn the tide. Their courage, intelligence, and unity had proven decisive. The aliens had underestimated them, and now they were paying the price. And the humans, patient and calculated, were preparing for the final stages of the conflict. They were ready to show the galaxy that attacking human colonies was not only a mistake, it was dangerous. The dragons had fully awakened.